Hello everyone and welcome to another Software Test Professionals Community webinar. My name is James and I'll be filling in for Smita today. Today we're joined by Preston-Watson. She's a QA engineer at Spruce Labs and she'll be talking to us about demystifying accessibility. Just some quick info on the upcoming conference. We'll be in Boston from September 23rd to the 26th. We have from AI and machine learning to DevOps to Agile and automation and everything in between. So go ahead and register for that. Also, a very special meet and greet reception this fall. We'll be doing a harbor cruise around the Boston Harbor. We network with our peers and speakers. So keep an eye out for an email later this week with more information on that. Our next community webinar is going to be Reshaping the Test Pyramid. Jennifer Boney, Rick Felice, both of Pink Lion AI. That's going to be in 2 weeks on August 28th. So go ahead to softwaretest.com and register for that one. If you're going to talk about us online, make sure you tag us. Our handle is @SoftwareTestPro or #STPWebinar. Also be sure to reach out and follow Crystal. Her handle is @ScopicEngineer. All right, so just to get going here, Crystal, let me do a quick introduction. Crystal is an accessibility and quality engineer based here in Denver, Colorado, with over 10 years of experience. Her work revolves around creating innovative and accessible applications for everyone, no matter background or ability. She brings a passion for quality and inclusion in technology to every opportunity she takes on. So with that, Crystal, let me hand over the control to you, and the floor is all yours. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, let me just show my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that. And thank you so much, James. I am Crystal, and yeah, so this is Demystifying Accessibility. I'm so glad to be. I am pretty passionate about accessibility, so I'm really glad to be able to share this with all of you. Just my name again, and I work at Spruce Labs. Spruce is a startup here in Denver, and we do kind of guest experience platform. It's kind of anything and everything. Right now, we're mostly in the retail and salon space, but pretty soon we will hopefully be just about everywhere. So I just want to go over the agenda for what I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to give a kind of a background on what a web accessibility is. I just want to kind of get us all on the same kind of space of what that actually means. And then I'm going to go into about 5 myths that many people tend to have about a web accessibility. There are a lot more than 5, but these are the 5 that I feel are the biggest that constantly come up. Then from there, I'm going to go into guidelines and standards about how to make your websites and applications accessible. And then I'm going to talk a bit about some features and tools on desktop and mobile devices. Okay, so let's get started. So what is web accessibility? If you're here listening to me, I know that you've probably you may have some background. You may be part of a team that's starting an accessibility initiative. You may be part of a more mature team. And I think there is a lot of people kind of come in with some notions of what that means. But I like to keep things pretty simple. And for me, that just means, it means websites and applications that accommodate all users on all devices, regardless of the situation, circumstances, or ability of the user. It's, that's pretty simple. And it's pretty simple in the statement. I feel that some people believe it's harder than it, once they get into actually developing that and testing that it's harder than it seems. But I don't think, I really don't think so. And we'll get more into why I don't think, it's hard, even though some people might believe that. And it's again kind of digging further into that. It means users can perceive, understand, navigate, interact, and contribute. I mean, that is what web accessibility is. What digital accessibility is, that users that are coming to your website, to your application, they can do everything that they need to do to navigate, to use that software, that website, that the company and the developers want them to experience. Something that you might, if you're around on social media a lot, and you might see, is a hashtag called ally. And so ally is a numerism, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. But it's a way to shorten accessibility, just because Twitter only allows you 240 characters. So it's a way to tag, if you're talking about accessibility, a way to tag your content and not take up as much character space. So, and I like, just there's 11 letters between the A and the Y in accessibility, so it's shortened to ally. So I might refer in slides coming down the line, you might see me use the ally word. So that is what it means. So I just wanted to get that off. Let's just start talking about some of the myths that you might hear about when it comes to web accessibility. I've been in I've been in the accessibility space for about 2 years, even though before that I had I had interest and touched a little bit upon it, working for different clients who needed accessibility testing. Previous to my job at Spruce, I was on a accessibility team, quality testing focus for a health insurance company. And in that, during my time in the last few years, I've heard a lot of really kind of false statements said about accessibility, kind of false, not, things that where people don't know a lot of accessibility will hear things said from other people's, like, well, accessibility is this, and not really, and those myths get, spread. And then you get the kind of common thought about accessibility is that, well, accessibility is hard, and accessibility is this and this and that. So I just want to, so we're going to just, I'm just going to go in and kind of hopefully clear up 5 of those bigger myths around accessibility for you. Myth 1, that is, and something, and this is probably the biggest out of all the 5 I'm going to talk about today, is people with disabilities don't use the internet. This kind of is I don't know why this is so pervasive, but it really is, and and it's just really not true. And let me kind of explain why. So here's some numbers. So according to the World Health Organization, about 1 billion people on the globe have some form of disability. And I'll go into the kind of categories of disabilities. There's ones that I think people commonly think of, but there are also many others that people may not be aware of. And out of that 1 billion, 56 million people with disabilities live in the United States, according to the last census. And and out of that 56 million, 28 million use the internet on a daily basis. Now, that's a daily basis. That's, that number is probably bigger for more, casual users who have disabilities who use it more casually. And no, that number sounds small, and it is, because it is kind of based, people with disabilities have more barriers to access when it comes to web and application accessibility. And that is due to the cost of equipment to make applications and websites available, and then a lack of training on that, on those devices that help them gain accessibility. These devices are, as I said, they can be very costly. JAWS, which I'll talk about a little bit later, I know for like just a developer copy is around like $1,000 US. So it's not cheap, and many people who have disabilities live on a fixed income. So that's a huge thing. And one of the biggest barriers is just an inaccessibility of web content. People, they have the devices, they have the equipment, they have the desire, and they can't access anything because the way the website, the way the application is built, it's impossible for them to access it with their devices that would allow them, if the application was built in a way that allowed assistive technology to access it, for the person to access it. So this is something that I wanted to show. This is from a ClickHole. It's the Onion, the kind of satire website. It's from one of their like auxiliary websites, and it's a little bit. It's called 10 Cat Gifts for the Blind, and I saw this. I had, to laugh, because I think a lot of people thought, well, that is, it's like, oh, of course, someone who's blind wouldn't, wouldn't need to know about what's happening with, a cat gifts. And the thing is that yes, they do. People who are blind love cat gifts. I am someone who has low vision. I love cat gifts. That being said, especially if I don't have, I wear contacts and glasses. When I don't have that in, I can't see the gifts very well, but I still love a good gift. And honestly, this, even though it seems humorous, this is actually like an awesome thing. And I wish, gifts were actually more accessible. If you're someone who does Twitter a lot, you may know that Twitter has an accessibility feature where you can add alt text to images, but you can't do that for GIFs. And that's a huge issue. I make sure to add alt text to my images, and I would love to do it for GIFs, but I can't, and that makes me really sad. So I usually just explain the GIFs in the actual tweet that I'm doing. So because, again, trying to make content, trying to make this experiences accessible to everyone. So let's go into myth number 2, that web accessibility is expensive and hard to implement. And this is absolutely not true. This myth has kind of taken off because a lot of places are now trying to add accessibility into their applications, into their websites. And I think, like with anything, if you are trying to add backwards functionality to something, it is going to be more expensive, more labor intensive if you just had started at the beginning. And that's the thing, is that with accessibility, especially when it comes to if you start with that intention in mind, making websites and applications accessible is no more labor intensive, no more costly than just building a site that that didn't have it in mind. But if you're trying to do backwards compatible things, it is going to get expensive. I mean, but that's true about anything. It's like, say you have a website that was built in Angular, and then after like a year, it's like, okay, well now we actually want to build it in React. And trying to go from Angular to React, it's not going to be the easiest, and it's not going to be the cheapest thing to do. And that's the same thing, and that's when it comes to accessibility. But if you do it in the beginning, if you build your site in React from the very beginning, if you build your site with accessibility in mind in the very beginning, yeah, like it's the same. It's no more than anything else. Okay, going to myth 3, and sorry if I'm going a little bit too fast. I'm going to slow myself down just a little bit. Accessibility makes websites ugly, and this kind of informs on the path myth. The reason this myth is around is because when you try to retrofit, when you try to kind of push accessibility and kind of just like slap it on to a site, you are not going to be kind of methodical about how you design it. And design and accessibility are not mutually exclusive. There are some great sites. Honestly, I feel that accessibility actually really improves design of websites. I think, and this is my personal opinion, and no one, so if you want to get mad at me. I feel that a lot of times they're design elements that get put into sites that are really needless, that are clunky, that really hinder the experience for users. And I feel that when sites are developed and apps are developed with accessibility from the very beginning, there is more thought put into what does this mean for our users? What is going to, not only, improve the experience, improve what they see visually, what they hear, depending on the device, say it's a phone, even what they feel. There's and if people can't, or some of those senses are not there for some of those for those users, well, let's think about, well, do we really need that? Is there something else that we could do that includes more people? So that's what when it comes to accessibility and design and making things quote ugly, I just don't. It's yeah. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit heated. So I just want to show this Apple, as you know, for a lot of places. I know I've been around, as like for 10 years, and I know when I first started out, I was a front-end developer. I remember everybody wanting to have their site look like Apple if they were kind of a business. And so Apple is probably one of the most visionaries when it comes to accessibility, and their site is one of the most accessible sites out there. And you would not call that ugly. It's very clean. And it does what it needs to do. It gets people the information that they want, which is buy our products. And and it makes and it does it for all users that need, that want to buy their products. And and that's why, especially when it does come for a lot of people with disabilities, Apple products are the most desired, because they are very intentional with accessibility. Okay, we're coming up on myth 4, and that is web accessibility is just for visual disabilities. And I understand where this comes from, because the web, for the from the very beginning of it, like the where, not super back where it was started in like college and university, like the sharing information, military. But, once it got to the majority of the population, it was mostly visually based. And so, and it's still visually based, I guess, um, somewhat. But web accessibility, but you have to understand there are a lot of people that they may have they may not be blind or have low vision, but they may be hard of hearing. They may have motor disability skill issues and disabilities. So web accessibility is not just about the visual. It's really a holistic approach to making things accessible for users. I'm gonna get into the types of disabilities. And as I said, you have visual disabilities, you have motor disabilities, cognitive, and then auditory. These categories can be broken down even further, and some places do that. But these four are the main categories when many people talk about disabilities. So I'm just kind of go into briefly about what these disabilities mean, and kind of some of the issues that arise for users that may have those disabilities. First up, visual disabilities, and that is the reduction in vision that cannot be corrected. Sorry about that. Little kind of corrected with standard glasses, contact lenses, medicine, or surgery. And some of those disabilities may be blindness, age-related macular degeneration, and color blindness. And what a user that has visual disabilities, they might have trouble, especially someone with low vision or colorblind, is inefficient color contrast. This is something I found this example on SoundCloud, and I found it because this is actually an issue. I have keratoconus in both eyes, and I also have ocular toxoplasmosis. I was born with really with scar tissue on my macula, so I'm like very low, like legally blind in one eye. When I don't have my contact in my other eye, very low vision. And I was trying to sign up for SoundCloud because I wanted to start a podcast because everyone has a podcast now. And I was looking for something, and I put a red rectangle around it. I could not see this. And I only noticed it because I turned the phone a different way and I saw that there may be writing. So I had to zoom in on this, and it's, it was a white background, very light gray text, and very hard to see. And with users who may not use screen readers, who may just like kind of me, I for the most part don't use screen readers, and I only zoom in when I need it. They may not see this at all. I know I didn't. Okay, so next are auditory disabilities, and that's full or partial decrease in the ability to detect or understand sound, and that is someone who might be deaf or is suffering hearing loss through injury, accident, or through older age. And something with someone who has an auditory disability that is a issue that comes up is incorrect and missing captions on video. This example right here is I'm actually talking at Develop Denver this tomorrow and Friday, and I was looking through their videos, kind of seeing the type of talks they had, and I turned on captions, and the captions, especially YouTube, they have auto-generated captions. For what they do, it's okay, it's really not great. And the reason why they're really not great is because you see right here, this person was talking about C3PO, and this caption says D3 Theo. And this is a huge issue because people who are deaf and are hard of, who have hearing loss are relying on these captions convey the information from the video, and they're getting conveyed the wrong information. And this is huge, like for especially if this is something that is an emergency, something that's needed for their job, they're not getting it. And so if you don't have captions on video, or in or if you don't have the correct captions, you are really putting your users at a huge disadvantage and really can harm them, depending on what that video is for. So next up is motor disabilities. This is physical impairments that can impede movement, coordination, or sensation. And this could be loss or damage of limbs, cerebral palsy, or someone that has arthritis. So something that with someone that has motor disabilities, that's a huge issue. And this is probably one of the number one accessibility issues that I've seen is like a lack of focus, giving focus to elements or illogical tab order. I don't think I'm going to play this. I don't know if you can see it, but in this example, the tab order is completely off. It goes from the logo to the search bar, to log in, sign up, and then back to the categories of menu items. And the tab order is completely out of order. You're giving information to your users who are using a keyboard or using assistive technology that uses keyboard inputs, the wrong information right off. It may not seem like a big deal, but there's a reason why you're presenting information in this way. And so if you're presenting this information this way for people who can use a mouse, you need to present the information the same way for someone who's using a keyboard or other assistive technology that uses keyboard inputs the same way, because you want them to get the same experience. And so not really having the correct tab order is a huge issue. Next up is cognitive disabilities, and that is difficulty in perceiving, recognizing, choosing, or understanding one or more types of mental tasks, and that could be ADHD, autism, or dementia. Something that I know many of us have come across are Captchas. That's something that is used quite a lot. Mainly, you see the ones that have either letters or numbers, and that can be a issue with people who are blind or low vision, or you'll see. I know Google's Captcha does, recognizing. They'll put up pictures and they'll say, click only the cars in the pictures presented to you, which is a whole host of problems for many users with disabilities. And one thing I've also seen, I don't see this a lot, but I've seen it enough. I think I saw this on Ticketmaster, though this is not the same example, is math captchas. And someone who has learning disabilities, giving them a math captcha is honestly, it's one, I don't think it's needed. Two, if you can look at this math captcha, it's very, it's weird to me, because it's like 90, like 93 spelled out, division sign, supposed to put in the missing number equals 31. The mixture of letters and and numbers, it's even for me, I feel that is very confusing, and for someone who has a learning disability, this can be virtually impossible. And depending on what this math Captcha is for, you are denying them access to an application that they may really is that is needed or required for some reason. So this is a huge issue that is seen a lot, and it really does prevent people from accessing some very important information. So disabilities can be permanent, temporary, or situational. Here is this is from Microsoft Design. This is just some images of the types of permanent, temporary, situational. You can see up in the top right there for touch, a permanent disability, maybe someone who has only the use of one arm. Temporary is someone who maybe broke their arm and is in a sling, and situational is a new parent who's carrying a child who might has use of both arms, but if they're carrying their child, they're indisposed for the amount of time that they're carrying that baby. There's also, when you're talking about hearing, permanent would be deaf, and temporary when someone has an ear infection, and situational is someone who's just doing something part of their job. As the example here is a bartender. So this is, you have to understand that disabilities are, I think a lot of people, when they think of disabilities, they think of permanent, but disabilities are, they are, it's more than just a permanent, disability, permanent issue that is forever like that. I just wanted to, I put this here just to talk about assistive technologies. I think I actually got this out of what, but assistive technologies are, devices, software that increase, maintain, or improve the functional capabilities that might be otherwise difficult or impossible. And some of those are screen readers, which I'll go into a little bit in a few minutes. Mouth sticks, and that's for someone who only has maybe control of their head. A head one, again, someone who has only control of the head, or their hands are not really, don't allow them to use a keyboard or a mouse. Eye tracking software that tracks eye movement to help people select things on their screen, and the sif and puff, which is, it's as it sounds, it's a device that allows a person to kind of sip and puff air, which controls the switch that controls their computer. So myth 5 is, and this is our last one, web accessibility only helps people with disabilities. And hopefully, as you kind of seen, that really is not true. Accessibility, web accessibility, device accessibility helps pretty much everyone, because, as I said, disabilities are not just, for someone who is, who has, who may be, blind or use of one arm. It's really, devices that, it really helps people who, maybe are in a temporary situation that they can't use their device as they normally would. And so I have some examples here. Someone holding a phone with one hand because they're doing something else, like maybe they have a drink in their hand. Someone watching a video in a coffee shop. I know some of you, you've been in a coffee shop where someone is turning up their video. So if someone's, a little bit more, kind of aware of those around them, they might watch a video, but watch it with the captions on. A person who is inebriated, one thing that if they're trying to say someone's trying to call being responsible and trying to call a Uber or a Lyft, being able to still do that in their inebriated state, and someone who doesn't want to put their contact in, which is me. So when I don't put my contact in and it's at night, having things accessible so I can still, read or do work is a huge thing for me. And using having accessible applications and software helps me, so I don't have to put in my contacts, because my contacts have about a 12-hour life before they become very, very uncomfortable. So I'm going to talk a little bit about guidelines and standards to make your websites and to make websites and applications accessible. One thing you might have heard, especially depending on what your team or your company or yourself are doing, or like your application, your website, which is WCAG, which stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And these are guidelines that are recognized by the W3C, and they are used by companies and organizations to make it's a set of guidelines that tell you how to make what you need to do to make your site accessible, of how, like, if you like the steps you can take to for certain things. So if you have, like, your written content, your visual content, if you have sound, multimedia, it gives the guidelines to make that those items accessible for as many users as possible. WCAG operates on 4 principles. It's shortened to POUR, but breaking that out, POUR means perceivable. Users must be able to perceive the information being presented. Operable, users must be able to operate the interface. Understandable, users must be able to understand the information as well as the operation of the user interface. And robust, users must be able to access the content as technologies advance. And it's really good. Like, if you really take these 4 principles into like when you're starting a project and you want to be accessible, kind of letting these 4 principles guide you is a huge thing. Because if you have these 4 things in mind and you're seeking to do this, you're really, honestly, you're half the way there. Because it's really half the battle of kind of knowing how do we want to go about making this accessible for everyone. WCAG has level of conformance, and this really comes up for, especially when it comes from legal requirements that I'll get into in the next slide. Level A is the most basic features that you can make accessible. A lot of that is adding alt text to images. Tab order and other things like that. Level AA deals with the biggest and most common barriers to disabled users. And if you have legal requirements, which most organizations do, and honestly all should, you need to be AA compliant. They conform to AA standards. And AAA is the highest and kind of most complex level at web accessibility. It's a lot of things that are really, really, if you kind of are at AA and you want to kind of go for that AAA, it's great. The only caveat with that is that there are some things that kind of are conflicting with each other. So if you're trying to make your site AAA, it's actually, I don't know if there really are any AAA accessible websites out there, because some guidelines actually conflict with each other when you get into the AAA. But if you're trying to make everything AAA compliant, but it's definitely when you can, it's definitely something you want to do. So getting into it's like if you have legal requirements. So there is I don't depending on again where where you are, your team are, your company is, you might have heard of Section 503 or Section 504. These are sections of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, and this covers making like not just websites obviously, but other like with just making like buildings and documents and all that accessible. And so web accessibility falls for a lot of companies under these two sections. So 508 covers healthcare, insurance companies, government agencies, agencies that receive some government funding. A lot of people don't, might think, well, we're not a government agency, but if you work at a place that gets some government funding, you fall under Section 508. Banking, financial institutions, airlines, if you are public-facing company, you have users that depend on your services, that require your services, you most likely fall under 508, and you need to be web accessibility client compliant, AA. And Section 504 deals with public schools and public and private schools. So public schools, K through 12, and also public universities, but also private schools and college and universities, because they do receive federal funding. So we're almost here. I will wrap this up around 10:50 for some questions, but I just wanted to go in a little bit into some features and tools, especially I know, as testers, and some of the things that, I've kind of learned throughout the last few years. If you are doing testing on desktop, I chose for non-Mac computer, I chose Windows 10 because I think that's going to be the most common that people come across. But these are some of features that you may come, that are part of at least with Mac, they come with by default with Mac and also with Windows 10. So VoiceOver is a screen reader that again comes with Mac. Switch control allows users to use software with a switch, and that is a device that allows, which is usually like that. It's a switch, and it allows someone who has limited mobility to navigate their computer using just one button. Text to speech will read off. Will read off text from the computer dictation, allowing the, users to kind of dictate notes. Siri, as we all know, again allows people to navigate and do things hands free. In Zoom, which is again zooming in on text, on items and elements of their that's on the screen or on their computer. And for Windows 7, a lot of these are kind of comparable. Narrator again is a thing that will read text from the screen. Color filters for someone who may be colorblind, so they can change the filters to fit their needs. Magnifier, which will magnify elements on the screen for a user. High contrast themes for users that are colorblind, users who have low vision. Keyboard shortcuts, which allow again users to kind of map things to their needs, especially if if they can't use a mouse. And then switch control, which is kind of same idea as on the Mac. Desktop tools these right now, I'm going to talk a little bit in the next slide about browser tools, but these are kind of platform kind of specific. So VoiceOver, again, is something is used a lot, especially with testing. Dragon Naturally Speaking, which allows users to what allows sorry, I'm getting I should have some water. But it's a speech recognition software, so it allows users to speak and give commands. I have Dragon starred on Mac because it actually was it was it, it's no longer on Mac, but there's older versions of it. So I wouldn't count on it, but I wanted to include it. Wave, which is a kind of accessibility evaluation tool that will kind of go through your site and application and give and kind of show you the different accessibility issues that you might have. JAWS and Evita are screen readers exclusively for PCs. JAWS is kind of expense paid, and Evita is actually a free tool. Dragon, which which does it's not decommissioned for PCs. Wave and Axe, and Wave and Axe they're kind of comparable in the things evaluating and doing, and Axe has some automation components. So there's some browser tools that are not, if you're doing things within the browser, and they're not platform specific. They are browser specific though. Again, Wave browser extensions. A lot of you may be familiar with Google Lighthouse, Axe, Chrome and Firefox, accessibility inspector for Firefox. So a lot of these, again, they're browser specific, but you can, if you can, they, with Firefox and Chrome, it's like you can have that on a Mac, you can have it on a PC. I'm not so sure about anything with Linux, so sorry about that. And also web accessibility toolbar with Internet Explorer. I don't think that works with Edge. I haven't really used it, but I just wanted to put that on there. Okay, we're almost done. I have like a little bit, about 2 minutes. Mobile features. So for iOS, a lot of the same things you'll find on the Mac OS, you'll find the mobile comparison on iOS. So that's voiceover, zoom, magnifier, inverting colors, again, to make that for someone who has low vision, who is colorblind, larger text, and switch control. For Android, you'll have TalkBack, which is a screen reader, magnifier, switch control, high contrast text, larger text, and switch controls on there twice. I am so sorry about that. And mobile tools. For Apple, there's honestly, this is pretty, for the most part, I just use VoiceOver, and then I've used the accessibility inspector with Xcode. I see that Axe is going to have an iOS software, but it's pending. Android, there's a little bit more. There's the Android Axe for Android. There's an accessibility scanner that you can put on Android phones that will scan for issues on your app. And then there's an Android accessibility kit that you can that kind of has like all in one place resources if you're to help you make your Android app accessible. So the last slide is that your biggest tools for testing are going to be TalkBack, VoiceOver, JAWS, and NDVA. These are used very heavily. I know I have used these heavily, especially I've done in accessibility, I've mostly done mobile accessibility testing. TalkBack and VoiceOver, they really help you spot a lot of issues, especially when it comes to tab order and things like that, which doesn't just, kind of key in on visual, just visual elements, but a lot, there are kind of devices that can hook up to mobile devices, and so they, which means you're, again, tab order, like scroll or the gestures need to be, need to be correct, and the same thing for on desktop, JAWS and NVDA, and also VoiceOver on Mac. Huge things that, getting comfortable with these kind of, and trying these out, especially. I wouldn't say go out and buy JAWS unless you have if you have money like that. But NDVA is free, and I say download that, try it out. But also, the hugest thing is just using your keyboard to navigate. Don't have a mouse, just use keyboard navigation, because so many assistive technology devices use keyboard inputs. And so if you can make your site and you can make, navigate by just a keyboard, that clears up a lot of accessibility issues. So that is it. I went over slightly, sorry about that. I forgot to put takeaways, but the biggest takeaway is just to kind of hopefully this gave you enough information about what accessibility is, and the truth about it, and make you a little bit more comfortable about diving in into testing with accessibility, or if you're someone who's developing, doing that. If you're going to do developing, semantic HTML, huge. If you just have clean HTML, especially HTML5, you you are a good portion of the way there. But yeah, that's really it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Crystal. That was very passionate and informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I got a couple questions here for you.
Mhm.
First one is from Steven. He says, thanks, Crystal. I've looked into WCAG standards, and we are starting to strive to make our company's site accessible under WCAG.
Mhm.
A lot of the standards contain heavy technical wording. Are there any ways to formally test against areas of my site that are not compliant, at least against tier AA?
No, can you read like the last half of that question again?
Yes,
Sorry.
so a lot of the standards contain heavy technical wording. Are there ways to formally test against areas of my site that are not compliant?
So yeah, so WCAG is very like technical. The good thing is that there are a lot of resources out there that actually kind of do more, like they kind of take on that technical kind of wording and make it a little bit more plainer. And there are checklists, and forgive me, I forgot to put that to add that resource to my slide. But there are checklists out there that will kind of go through of the things in kind of plain language that what you need to check for. That will map back to WCAG guidelines. I think even WCAG has some checklists themselves that does that. I know DQ does that. There's the that has some checklists, and they have a lot of paid things, but they also have a lot of free resources. The Paciello group, again, a lot of paid. They're kind of accessibility consultants, but they have a lot of free resources, and they have like checklists that kind of in plain words that will help you go through your site. Also, kind of a start is using something like Google Lighthouse. Don't rely on it, but kind of doing one of those kind of audits on your site. If you have now, if you're doing like mobile, there's there's kind of there's the scanner for Android, there's Xcode, but that'll kind of go through your site, give you a jumping off point. And a lot of times they'll say, here are the issues that we found, but these are things that you can also check because this this extension, this software cannot check these how they are currently.
Perfect. Thank you. Next one comes from Jay, and I think this kind of ties in with the one just asked. The general guidance on automated tools/extensions is that they catch only 30 to 50% of all accessibility issues.
Mm.
Guidance on places to find consultants or other good resources who can provide good accessibility testing.
Yeah, so some of the bigger three, and I just said like DQ, they are accessibility consultants. And I'm totally pronouncing that right. It's the Paciello group, also accessibility consultants that a lot of companies use in Level Access. When it comes to ones I've worked with personally, I've only worked with Level Access. And they will come in, they'll help you. You can usually it's about by company context of what they'll do. I worked on a team that worked with them for certain things, especially when it came to audits. And that was it. I know that all these companies have consultants that will may come in and help you actually just talk to you about how to build your sites and applications. So those are the big three. There are others out there. Again, if you guys I know I'm just telling the stuff. So if you want to email me or kind of tweet at me on Twitter, I can give you links to some of this stuff so you don't have to remember it. But yeah, those are the kind of the bigger three that I know of right off the top of my head.
Awesome. Thank you. And one last one, I think we have time for one more, just a quick one. Do you have any websites or applications that are good examples of companies using accessibility for disabilities?
Yeah, so Apple definitely is, so websites that are good examples of accessible sites or companies that are
Right.
okay.
Right. More websites or applications.
Okay. So Apple is one definitely is huge when it's pretty big when it comes to making their site accessible. Also, Microsoft has a big accessibility initiative, and also their main website is really accessible. Then when it comes to mobile mobile-ish kind of applications, I'm going to put this out there. I worked for Aetna, and they have been doing a really good thing. That I no longer work for them, but I really want to they have done a tremendous work in making their mobile applications accessible, especially they're started with iOS. They now have an Android app that they're working on. So, and I know that's like healthcare. There's oh man, I'm gonna trying to think of some other ones. There are some, and I'm blanking right now. When it I would like to shout out Microsoft, for especially they've started to do a lot with accessibility gaming. So if you are a gamer and you have a disability with Xbox, especially with their controllers, they're really doing some great things with that. And I'm not a big gamer, but I play games a lot. But and some other kind of video game companies like say the Spider-Man on PS4 is, has some really good accessibility components to it. Oh, again, just tweet up your email me and I'll think some more later.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Crystal. I think that ends our webinar for today. We really appreciate having you. It was very informative. It was very passionate. Even as I'm not a tester myself, but this was very, very relevant, I feel, for any industry, not just software testing. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you all.
All right. So before I leave you, just a few to remember. We have the STBCon Fall 2019 coming up in September, the 23rd to the 26th. It's going to be in Boston, and register for that. Also coming up, another community webinar in 2 weeks on the 28th. Jennifer Bonine and Reese of Pink AI are going to be doing Reshaping the Test Pyramid. And with that, I leave you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. And thank you again, Chris, for a very great webinar. We hope to see you at STBCon in 2020, hopefully. But thank you very much. I appreciate you coming, and we will talk to you guys soon. Have a great day.